What happens when the life you built with your own two hands can no longer be lived with those hands? For years, Yvonne understood limits. As a cook, she knew how to coax sweetness from carrots, how to transform simple ingredients with patience and heat. Living with sickle cell disease, she also knew how to pace herself, how to work within the boundaries of a body that demanded care. But in late 2023, a medical crisis changed those boundaries forever. After a 6-week coma, months in the hospital, and the loss of both legs and her fingers, she woke up to a body she didn't recognize and a life that would never look the same. The kitchen that had once been her refuge, her independence, her identity, suddenly felt impossibly far away. And yet, she went back. Not the same way, not alone, but with her taste, her memory, her imagination, and a growing belief in a phrase from her childhood: we do it together. Welcome to That's Life, I Swear. This podcast is about life's happenings in this world that conjure up such words as intriguing, frightening, life-changing, inspiring, and more. I'm Rick Barron, your host. That said, here's the rest of this story. While writing my podcast scripts, I use many resources: books, newspapers, and blogs, always on the lookout for intriguing articles to write about. Recently, one caught my eye in the New York Times. As I read it over my morning coffee, I noticed this article regarding Yevande Komolafi. Yevande is a Nigerian cook, food writer, author, and food stylist, and is best known for introducing Nigerian food to U.S. audiences. She joined the New York Times as a cooking editor in February of 2021. As I began writing the script for this podcast episode, I realized that to capture the essence of the story truly, it was best to let Yevande share her own words for this story she wrote. The story reveals how she woke up from a coma and soon learned her body would be profoundly altered. She recounts her journey back to the kitchen and to herself. So let's get started with this great article, courtesy of the New York Times, again, in Yevande's own words, as it should be. Let's begin, shall we? Throughout my 2-decade career as a cook, working in restaurants and test kitchens, developing recipes and writing cookbooks, I have been aware of limitations. Carrots, for example, must be prepared a certain way to harness their natural sweetness, coaxing out the sugars by roasting them to a robust depth. So it is with my body too. Living with a chronic illness, there have always been limitations to understand boundaries in which I had to operate. I'm impulsive by nature, eager to act on ideas once I have them. But over time, I learned to pace myself, to be more patient, to avoid long hours on my feet. And then after many years of figuring this out, the boundaries changed again. I was born with sickle cell disease, an inherited blood disorder. All my life, I had to take exceptional precautions, balancing exertion with adequate periods of rest. I can't just tough it out. In December of 2023, I went to a hospital in New York City with flu-like symptoms and the onset of a sickle cell crisis for what I thought would be a routine stay. But I did not receive the care I needed, and the results were catastrophic. My memory of this time exists only in text messages I sent to family and close friends. I'm still in so much pain. On the afternoon of January 11th, 2024, I woke up from a 6-week-long coma in a different hospital, not knowing how I gotten there. This was followed by 6 more weeks of high fevers and a fog of confusion. A breathing tube had been inserted in my throat. I could only mouth what I felt. A horrendous amount of pain, adding another layer of trauma. It was a few weeks more before I could turn my neck sideways to take in the hospital room beyond its patterned ceiling. The room was bright, sunlight filtering in through large windows along my bed. Friendly nurses spoke to me in loud, high-pitched voices, and stoic doctors rattled off my circumstances in their detailed, matter-of-fact way. I was able to recognize my mother, who had flown in from Nigeria, where I was raised, to spend nights with me, and my husband and younger brother, who would visit during the mornings and afternoons. My constant and singular thought during that time was this: if they could see me, then I was safe. In a meeting with family and medical staff in early March of 2024, I learned that both my legs would not survive, and neither would my fingers. Several amputations were scheduled, and after 7 months in the hospital, I would be sent home as a bilateral, below-the-knee, and digital amputee, navigating the world in an electric wheelchair. I'd later be fitted with prosthetic hands and legs. In the weeks after my coma, while I was still in the hospital, I was hungry for so many things: the warmth of companionship and friendly conversation, a sense of agency in my care, and as soon as I could sustain it, solid foods. I craved anything with flavor, especially Nigerian food. I spent my days browsing menus on the iPad my husband Mark had it fixed to my hospital bed, strategizing deliveries to my room. My meals went from lackluster hospital food to carefully curated lunches and dinners with family and friends who visited. Now, Sundays were my favorite. One of my editors, Nikita Richardson, would stop by with an abundance of baked goods from cafes and pastry shops across the city. We would set up the bounty she collected and sample all of them, leaving traces of flaky pastry or crumbs of cake flicked across my table. We would catch up on the world outside my four walls. These times together were more than curative. In those moments, I felt as though I didn't have to focus on all the ways my world would change after discharge, though I was absolutely certain I would return to the kitchen. I just needed to figure out how. In the meantime, I could imagine myself pursuing pastry shops with my friend, and it was in this dreamy world, somewhere between trance and reality, that I met the brown butter cornmeal cake from Radio Bakery in Brooklyn. The cake was assertive in its nuttiness, an exquisite balance of sweet and savory, with a crunchy exterior and a dense, billowy softness within. It became the perfect pastry to complement the first sips of coffee I could manage. Nikita would bring me two, one for Sunday and another for the next day. It was exactly the kind of recipe I would have jumped to adapt in my roomy kitchen. I longed for the time when I would be back there, with my two young daughters, creating side by side, baking for them. I missed them so much, it hurt my heart. It turned out that when I did return home later that summer, life there was no different. What had changed was me. And here I was, tasked instead with rediscovering myself as a person, a wife, a mother, and a cook. In those early days, I watched my mother work, like I did as a child, spending days cooking Nigerian dishes that I longed for, such as pepper soup. A daily rotation of home health aides assisted me with the mundane task of bathing, washing, and dressing. I began dreaming of the foods I yearned to make, even after a long hospitalization, when so much of my physical body had changed. I was grateful for what remained intact: my sense of taste and smell, my culinary knowledge, my ability to eye when a dish is cooked just right. When I returned to work as a columnist and recipe developer last April, I began churning out recipes as I had before, but now with the help of a cooking assistant who would act as my hands. The kitchen had always been a refuge for me, a place where, no matter the circumstances, my world made sense. I knew I could still harness the best qualities of an ingredient if I just let my skill and spirit guide me. The inspiration for my recipes still begins as a sensory image, or a thought that floats across my mind. But how I write them down has changed, as I talk to my computer and rely on its accessibility software to record my words in text form. Sometimes it doesn't understand my accent and until I enunciate the syllables in a clipped tone. I include as much detail as possible, including cues to look out for along the way. Each day, my rotating cast of assistants and I begin at my kitchen table, going over a recipe step by step. They're in charge of chopping and slicing ingredients and cooking the dish from start to finish, navigating the too tall counters and impossible to open cabinets. I stay present, an active participant in the process, watching, touching, listening, tasting, and taking in the aromas wafting through the kitchen. I try to lead with kindness, and I don't mind repeating myself. I'm not always successful. I sometimes get impatient having to open up a world that I once existed in alone. Having other cooks in the kitchen with me is an intimacy I was not used to. And there's the frustration of needing to ask for help while giving guidance. It feels like leading my personal kitchen brigade, but without the ability to show exactly how I like a vegetable diced, or the best method for folding butter into dough. Our learning curves are steepest when the skills we've leaned on all our lives have been swept out from under us. I had to set my faith in my physical body aside, focusing on the skills I do have, and consigning to the future the skills I must relearn, like how to whisk a bowl of cream till milky, soft peaks with prosthetic hands. Nearly 2 years into my recovery, I finally got around to adapting the recipe for the brown butter cornmeal cake, originally developed by the chef Kelly Menson of Radio Bakery. The recipe is inspired by the classic French brown butter financier, substituting coarse ground cornmeal for the traditional almond flour, while turbinado sugar gently sweetens the cake and gives it a crunchy exterior. I added my own touch, cherries for their tartness and fleshy texture. Fresh or frozen, sour, ping, or dark sweet cherries will work. Otherwise, this homemade version retains the original depths of brown sugar, crispiness of cornmeal, and caramelized, crystallized crunch. In a life spent traversing long distances, my journey back to the kitchen has been one of the greatest distances I've ever traveled. Cooking was once my time to reflect on the past and future as I stood stirring or watching something come together in a pan, planning articles, recipes, cookbooks. Now, so much of my life is spent leaning on others, and making food is no longer the solitary and meditative act it once was. It calls to mind a phrase from my homeland, meaning, we do it together, we collaborate. This has become a refrain that I recite when I'm writing recipes, taking meals with loved ones, and perform the once simple task of everyday life. I'm still very much in recovery. I've had my prosthetic hands for several months, and now I'm learning to walk on my new legs. I set alarms to remind myself to do my daily stretches, and I have weekly in-person appointments to learn how to best use these mental and silicone extensions of my residual limbs. I still feel the curative effects, physiologically and psychologically, of all the foods I crave. Sometimes it's a Nigerian dish that nourishes me deeply, and a brief moment sends me back to the kitchen of my childhood home. Often it's a pedestrian dish as fried calamari or shrimp scampi that excites my will to live. I find myself marveling at how little it takes to feel alive. So what can we learn from this story? What's the takeaway? Just like carrots need the right method to become sweet, Yolanda showed that a life with constraints can still be rich, creative, and deeply meaningful. The boundaries didn't disappear, they shifted. And instead of resisting that reality, she learned to work within it, again and again. So the lesson here, a good life isn't built on total freedom. It's built on understanding what is possible and pouring yourself into that. Well, there you go, my friends. That's life, I swear. For further information regarding the material covered in this episode, I invite you to visit my website, which can be found on Apple Podcasts for show notes and the episode transcript. As always, I thank you for the privilege of you listening and your interest. Be sure to subscribe here or wherever you listen to podcasts so you don't miss an episode. And we'll see you soon.